of Daniel. We're going to pick it up in chapter 7. Responds right after Ezekiel and right before the book of Hosea. And just this Sunday morning, like I mentioned, and so as always, prayerfully, I decided to break away from my usual teaching and sermon teachings that I normally bring before you. Also, so as to always keep you guys aware, all of you as Christians, as far as what's coming in the future. And I really mean that seriously. We need to always be aware of what's happening, what's going to happen, to keep us on our toes. That's one of the main reasons. I promised the Lord years ago that when I come up here, that every now and then I would speak on the end times of what's going to happen. And what you want to hear, what you're going to hear me say today, what I'm going to talk about is controversial. I want you guys to understand that. And I want you to know that what you're going to hear is not meant to offend anybody. It's meant to inform you. Please understand that. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I want you guys to be open-minded. Think about what you're going to hear. And I will give you a disclosure. Could I be wrong? Yes, I could be wrong. Because what you're going to hear is controversial. You'll understand why. So keep that in mind. We're going to talk about what's going to happen in the end time right before the return of the Lord. The prophecies that we're going to look at, what I want us to take a look at, in the book of Daniel, we're going to go to chapter 7. That's where we're going to begin. We're going to go to the book of Daniel and the book of Revelations once we're done with that. So we're going to look at that in Daniel and the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. We're going to look at the prophecies that I want us to take a look at, also with a reference made by the Lord himself about what will take place that relates to the prophecies that we're going to read about. In all fairness, let me say this. What we will read about within the church body, we have different schools of thought. Not all take what we're going to read literally. Not all take what we're going to read and believe that it's going to come in the future. Not all believe it will play out like possibly most believe it will. And I'm one of those who does believe what we're going to read will take place still in the future. But I want to be clear that I will be the first to tell you that I'm not considered or wouldn't be considered to be an expert on prophecy. No. I do know a lot of things over the years since I've been a Christian for some time. I know a lot of things. I understand a lot of things. But I will be the first to tell you that I could not be considered an expert on prophecy. But as far as Bible prophecy is concerned, there are many things that are clear. We can understand them. What's going to happen, what will happen, and what most and we believe will take place in the last days. This is where we want to begin. This is what we're going to read. So hear me out. But like I say, there are people who look at it differently, and that's okay. Let's pray. Because I'm just going to go right into it. We've got a few things to read. Hopefully I can get through this. I don't want to fudge or cheat, so I'm going to try to do it and not get you out here too late. Father, we thank you as always for your word and your truth. Lord, minister through me as always. Lord, open up their eyes of their minds and their hearts, at least, my Father, to consider what they're going to hear. Bless your word, bless your truth. Help us to understand, my Father, and exercise our minds, because it's your word and your truth, my Father, that we need to decipher, we need to learn, we need to know it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Daniel chapter 7. Let me turn there. We're going to pick it up in the very first verse. Here in the book of Daniel, it begins during the time of the Babylonian Empire, during which time the Babylonians, under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar, has conquered and taken Israel and the Jews back to Babylon. This is what's going on. And they remained captive by them for 70 years. Just like the Lord had prophesied, that's exactly what happened. They were there for 70 years. According to church history, listen to this. The prophet Daniel was born about 621 BC. We all know BC, right before Christ. According to church history, he was born about 621 BC. And it was in 605 BC when the Jews, including Daniel, were taken. So if you do the math, it's believed that Daniel was about 16 years old when they were taken to Babylon, captive. He was a teenager. That's Daniel himself, besides all the Jewish people. Here, the 7th chapter begins with Daniel being given a vision from God, believed to be a depiction of 4 dominant world empires. And it's the 4th world empire, the 4th one that it mentions, that I want us to really mainly be concerned about. Because it's the same kingdom spoken about when we get there in the book of Revelation. Keep that in mind. It's the same kingdom. So picking it up in verse 1, the Lord gives Daniel a vision, and I want you guys to listen to what Daniel has to say. Verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Belshazzar was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has long gone. He's passed away. He's died. His grandson is now on the throne. This is Belshazzar. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. And as far as the sea is concerned, it's believed that we're referring to, it's talking about the Mediterranean Sea over the Middle East. Verse 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Now I want to say this. I do not know, I want to be honest, I do not know specifically all the details given here. I don't know if anybody can really know as far as all the detail, because they can turn out differently. We can get this interpreted all kinds of ways. I won't even begin to do that. The Lord has not given me that wisdom. Let me be honest with you, to be able to do that. There are some prophecy scholars that believe they believe they have idea what this could mean, but you can listen to different prophecy teachers, and they all have their take. In general, we know what's going to happen. But as far as details, like the lion had eagle's wings, I can tell you it was a flying lion. If that's what he means, you know. We can go all over the place. I'm not that great as far as being able to do this, and I won't do that. Because you can go all over the place with symbolism. But anyways, I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly, the second one, another beast, a second like a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. Verse 6, the third one. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on his back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, in verse 7, this is the one that I want us to mainly be concerned about. Because this one here, as we're going to see, is also spoken about in the book of Revelation. This is the one that we need to pay attention to. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the rest with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Remember that. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one. Just so you know, this little horn is believed to be referring to what we believe the Antichrist. Just keep that in mind. Verse 8, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking. In my translation, in English says pompous words. The original says speaking great things. Keep that in mind, because we're going to see this also in the book of Revelation. Verse 9. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. That's another word or title for the Lord himself, Ancient of Days. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fire stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 ministered to him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And remember, that's really, in Hebrew, that's an expression, that was the way they expressed it. But we can say today millions and millions and millions, if not billions. It's the same thing. Then it says, the court was seated and the books were opened. And that is a reference to the end. In fact, I have a reference Bible, and the reference given for this, you don't have to turn to it, but the reference for this points you to Revelation chapter 20, because it opens up, it talks about the great white throne of God, where the books are open, including the book of life, which is the book of the Christians who have come to Christ. It gives you that passage. So it's talking about the end after these kingdoms, and especially after this fourth one. Then in verse 11, remember this is Daniel. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words or great things which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came unto the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. Then all peoples, nations, and languages should that all people, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Okay. Daniel, of course, doesn't fully understand everything. Just like we do a lot of times. He wants to know. He's seen what he's seen, and most of it is symbolic, right? Well, this is what he says in verse 15. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to the one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. And with that, verse 17. Those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then in verse 19. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nail of bronze, which devoured and broke in pieces and trampled the rest of them with its feet. And the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows, or the rest of them. Verse 21. I was watching, and the same horn, believed to be the Antichrist, keep that in mind. I was watching, the same horn was making war against the saints. And who are the saints? That's the believer, the Christians. And prevailing against them until, notice that, this horn was making war against the believers, the Christians, until, which tells us this has to happen right before the Lord comes back. It's pretty self-explanatory. I want you guys to see that. Verse 21, I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days, that's the Lord, came, and judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said, verse 23, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall what? Devour the whole earth. Not part of the earth, all of the earth. This is the kingdom that's going to exist right before the return of the Lord. Shall devour the whole earth, trample it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall rise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He, and it's a reference to the horn that comes from them, believed to be the Antichrist. He shall be different from the first one. He shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. And if you notice, it doesn't say he will change it. He'll intend. Well, if he's going to try to change law, I can understand he wants things going his way, right? He wants to do things according to what he believes, to side with his power and his authority. How he's going to change time, that I do not know. I can just imagine, what is he trying to do? What does he intend to do? Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. This is an expression of 3.5 years. Keep that in mind. Time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. Remember that. We're going to see this again. Verse 26. But the court shall be seated. That's the throne of God. It's going to be put in place. He's going to take control. The court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of his kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom, the Lord, is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Then in verse 28, this is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance, which has been his appearance, changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. Keep that in mind. Let's go now to the very last chapter of this book, Daniel, which is chapter 12. Chapter 12. I want you guys to see that it's referring to the end. This is what I want you guys to see. Something that hasn't happened as of yet. It might be better if I back up to chapter 11. Let's pick it up in verse 36. You can understand what we're being told in verse 1 of chapter 12. Let's back up to chapter 11 here in verse 36. Because here in verse 36, if you read Daniel, you'll have to read it for yourself. I can't do that today because it's a lot. But if you read Daniel, you'll see that he's talking about the same kingdom, the same horn. The Antichrist, believed to be. So picking it up with that, verse 36. Then the king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper until the wrath has been accomplished, for what has been determined shall be done. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women. Now some have said this, that the Antichrist, based on what we just read right there, nor the desire of women, some have said that the Antichrist may be a homosexual. I don't follow that. It could be, but I don't follow it. Why? Because it doesn't say he won't care about the desire for women. That's different. This is the desire of women. He might not care what women desire or think, but we don't know. But some people do believe that. I don't give 100% credence to that. It may or may not be. This is the desire of women, not the desire for women. That's different. Let's read it again. Verse 36. Or verse 37, mind me. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a God of fortresses, that's military might, and a God which his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign God, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many and divide the land for gain. It's believed that that is a reference to Israel dividing the land to appease other people. And we know what's going on in Israel right now. Whatever the case. Verse 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come up against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. He shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, we know that's Israel. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand. Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. If we know the history of the people that descended from these, we know that's a lot of the Arabs. I won't get into a whole lot of it because there's no time. We may know in some other occasion. Verse 42. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his heels. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And then in verse 45, get this. He shall plant the tents of his palace, maybe we can say his headquarters, between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. That's Jerusalem. That's where he's going to establish himself. He shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. Now with that, with verse 1, this is why the writer Daniel says, at that time, Michael, the archangel, shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. That's the Jewish people. A lot of people don't know that there's Michael, the archangel, who's a defender of Israel and the Jewish people. It's always been like that. At that time. I don't know how many of you ever seen Left Behind series? Has anybody ever seen that? Yeah? Yeah. It goes through this, it pretty much goes through this. Of course, they fill in gaps, but for the general, it goes through all this. There's a lot here. You would have to read the whole book from beginning to end to understand most of this. And I'm just making it short. During that time, okay, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands and watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Did you hear that? And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall what? Shall awake. That is the resurrection. That could be only the resurrection, which tells us that these things have to occur right before that. Right before that end. That's what I want you guys to see. Verse 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting content. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, and if you read Daniel, you know it's an angel talking to Daniel. He says, but you, Daniel, because Daniel wants to know these things. He wants specifics. He wants details, but he's just giving general information. Even with us, we don't know specifics. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. That simply means close it. Close the book, because it wasn't intended for him to know everything until the time of the end. Shut up the book and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And a lot of Bible scholars believe that could be a reference to the way it is today with our modern travel and technology. And all the knowledge that we have, as they say, it changes every so many years, or how many years, I forgot what it is, that we advance. Computer technology, one goes obsolete, another one comes up. This is Bible scholars believe this is a reference to that. It may. Who knows? I wouldn't doubt it. But this is the way it's going to be in the end. And then in verse 5, then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank and the other on the other riverbank. And one said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Verse 7, then I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that for a time, times, and half a time. There's your 3.5 years again. And when the power of the holy people shall be completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. And of course, Daniel doesn't fully understand everything. In verse 8, although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. That is why many Christian scholars, and I'm one of them that believes that as we head towards the end, more and more of this is going to come out and is going to be understood. At the time of the end, then this book is going to be completely unsealed. Then in verse 10, many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Now, look at verse 11 carefully. This is the reference that Jesus makes in Matthew chapter 24 and in Mark chapter 13 when he's speaking about the end, the last days. Jesus refers to this passage. Now, why do I bring that out? Because you have people who don't believe this. Oh, this happened then, way back when. Well, Jesus referenced this passage. Remember, this is before Christ. Jesus is believed that when he was killed on the cross and resurrected, that was in AD 33. And Jesus mentioned this about the time of the end. When you see this, then he tells the people, we're going to read it, he tells them to flee. So we know this, that this has not been fulfilled. Even during Jesus' time, it had not been fulfilled, which is why he references this. It was still future. And if you ask me, even as right now, as I speak, it's still to come. What does it say? Verse 11, from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away. This is a reference to the temple in Jerusalem that needs to be there in Israel, in Jerusalem. The temple has to be there. It's known as the third temple. Right now, Israel does not have a temple. Biblically, they have to have a temple because this is what's going to happen. And this is what a lot of people have a hard time believing. The temple has to be erected and constructed. And that's going to be in Jerusalem. There's a debate about where it belongs because of the Arabs, Muslim, the Dome of the Rock sits in the location where the temple is believed to have been in the past. So there's a lot of debate about where it's going to be. Because if they mess with the Arabs, the Muslim temple, there's going to be all kinds of war. It's going to set up a major thing. And so the Jews, the Israeli government, respects that because they know what can happen. But the temple has to be erected. This is what Jesus was referring to. Because whoever this person is that does what he does, stop the sacrifice, he's going to make it cease. And just for the record, if you don't know, right now they say that the Orthodox Jews and the government, they're ready to build the temple right now. It's in the works. People go back and forth about this. I don't know all the details, but they say it's in the works. They're ready to build the temple. It's the third temple. The only reason that they haven't constructed it is because of the Arab issue. They control that territory there. They know that's going to set up a war if they do anything. But if they're waiting for an okay, they're saying that they have all that's required to be able to build that temple. And all the details associated with it. They have everything in place. How soon can they build it? They say it can be built within a year, less than a year. That's what they say. From that time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up. Keep that in mind. We all know what an abomination is. Set up means put into place. Whatever it is that they're going to do in the temple, they're going to stop the sacrifices and they're going to set up something that's abominable, unholy. When that happens, there shall be 1,290 days left. If you do the math, that's 3.5 years. Keep that in mind. And then something interesting, the next verse, look at what it says. Blessed is he who awaits and comes to the 1,335 days. That's a difference of 45 days. What this means, I have no idea. Some people think and believe, and they may be, may not be, that when this abomination occurs, there's going to be 3.5 years left until the end, before the Lord comes back. Or when everything is finalized, then the Lord comes. In the next verse, the 45 days different, they believe it could be the day that the Lord comes back, but we don't know that. We don't know no dates because we don't know when this is going to start and begin. We don't know that. And with that, verse 13, talking to Daniel, but you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. Now, keep that in mind, you guys. Let's go to the book of Revelation now. Let's pick it up in chapter 13. Revelations chapter 13. The book of Revelations, of course, as most know and believe, it's primarily a book of information that speaks about what's going to happen in the future. 90-95% is based on that. So it's talking about the future, most of which is believed is still to come. Here in the 13th chapter, along with other verses, we're going to look at chapter 17. We're going to get there also. This chapter, and in chapter 17, is speaking about the rise of a beast. It's speaking about this metaphorically and figuratively as the beast, believed to be the Antichrist, along with the rise of his world empire. The world kingdom, this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. This is the way the scripture depicts the Antichrist and his kingdom. Like in Daniel, but there's another figure, and here's where it gets controversial. Here's why I say it. I want you guys to be open-minded, and I don't mean to offend anybody. But there's another figure spoken of figuratively, spoken of as the harlot, which is, like we will read, connected to the beast. And as long as I've been a Christian, and I've been a Christian for a long time, this has always been controversial. You'll see why. Even before I was a Christian, it's controversial. It remains, and it's going to stay like that way until we know for a fact. Whoever this harlot is plays a major part and role in the end times and is connected to the beast. And I want you guys to, like I say, be open-minded about what you're going to hear, because even I don't know it for a fact, but I'll give you my opinion, okay? Verse 1 of chapter 13. Then I stood, this is John the disciple, John the divine they come, John who was the closest to the Lord. This is during the time that he was exiled, incarcerated, and made banished to the island of Patmos for speaking about Jesus Christ. The island of Patmos, remember, was a place where they held their political prisoners. They worked them as slaves, working the mines in this island. John was exiled there for preaching about Jesus Christ. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, just like in Daniel. And on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. I don't know what that name is. I don't know if it's the name of the beast. I don't know if it's the name of Satan or any other name. I have no idea, but it's blasphemous. Verse 2, now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon, we know who that is, gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. What does that tell us? I think that's pretty easy. We know who backs, enforces the beast. Verse 3. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. Here's where you have a difference of teaching. Some believe that the Antichrist is going to be killed and come back to life. I don't follow that view, because we're going to see that the heads were explained, it's interpreted for us what the heads are. We're going to see that. But some Bible scholars believe that the Antichrist is going to be killed and slain, but he's going to miraculously resurrect. I used to believe that in the past, but I no longer believe that. You're going to see why. Could it be? Yes, it's possible. I don't know. But let's continue. Verse 4. So they worship the dragon. That's what gets me. That one gets me. How so? In the end, how's that possible? I mean, not that it's not possible, but how are they going to win? Because that's Satan. Because he goes on to say, so they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast. That I can understand, because we're told what they're going to do. But the people, one way or the other, they're also going to worship Satan. That really perplexes me. How is that going to happen? It must be because this is what we're being told. One way or the other, this is what's going to happen. So they worship the dragon, he gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Who is able to make war with him? Which tells us that he's going to be a great military might and power. Such that people are going to say, man, who can defeat this guy? That's why Bible scholars, if you ever hear, they're going to say that he's going to be a military man. Someone that has a lot of power and might. Who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things, just like we were told in Daniel. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to, in my English is continue, which sounds like remain, but the original says he was given authority to act, to do what he does. For how long?
42 months.
42 months. Do the math, there's your 3.5 years. Once again, 3.5 years. It is believed that in the end time, there's going to be 7 years left before the end. I wish I can get into all that, and you see that in the book of Daniel also. I wish I could get into all of that, but I can't because there's no time. But there's going to be a final 7 years right before the end, known as the tribulation period. I believe, based on what we're reading, others also believe, this is the view that I hold, that it will be in 3.5 years when he will enter the temple and set up the abomination of desolation. And from that point, it'll be 3.5 years that's left. 7 years of tribulation, but the final 3.5 years will be when he goes into the temple and he does what he does, and then all hell breaks loose. But he goes on to say, then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Everyone. Verse 8. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of the life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. All except the believers, basically, right? And then in verse 9, if anyone has an ear to hear, let him hear. Now, I'm going to cut this short because we're going to go to chapter 17. You read the rest of it and it tells you what he's going to do. He's going to cause the river to get a mark of the beast. 666. But let's pick it up in chapter 17. Chapter 17, verse 1. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls. You have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. All of them represent a judgment by God against the earth during that time. The final ones are the 7 bowls. This is one of the bowls that is being spoken about here. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, here's where you guys want to pay attention. Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. The question is, the controversy is, who is the harlot? Who is John referring to? Who's this harlot? The many waters, the Bible is going to interpret that for us. Keep that in mind. It's going to tell us what the waters are. But who is the harlot? Let's read again. Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now let me say this. We basically are not talking about physical fornication. We all know the word fornication, right? Sexual sin. This is referring to spiritual fornication. False doctrine, false theology. This is what this is referring to. With verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Whatever it is, she's giving them to drink this wine. But it's a figure of speech. That's what this is. Verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. That's the kingdom and that's the Antichrist. The woman was sitting on the beast. Remember, you've seen this. It's a figure of speech. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. And remember, the word scarlet is a bright red with a tinge of orange, if I remember it. I saw the woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There it is again, that same kingdom. Verse 4. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones, and pearls, having in her head a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead, a name was written. Mystery, Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Who is this woman? Why is it associated with Babylon? The Tower of Babel was erected in what country? Who knows? Originally, it was in the territory of what we know today as modern-day Iraq. Why were they erecting it? They believed they wanted to reach the stars in defiance against God. When God saw what they were doing, He confused them and scattered all the people all over the world so they won't accomplish or finish what they were doing. It was known as the Tower of Babel or Babel, which originally means gate of God. It was changed to confusion because the Jews, as a derogatory against the people, what they were trying to do, because God confused the language, it came to be known as the city or the gate of confusion. But originally it was the gate of God. In fact, Saddam Hussein tried to resurrect Babylon. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Before they did what they did, they conquered Iraq. He was in the works of rebuilding Babylon because they believe, as it signifies, that was the gate of the gods. That's where the gods interacted with man. And so Saddam Hussein, that's what Babylon signified. It was a port entry of the gods interacting with man. That is what Babel means. That is why the Lord confused them, because of what they're trying to do. So, does this mean that Babylon is going to come back and that's the controversy? I don't believe that. And I could be wrong though, I don't know this for a fact. But I don't believe that. Because this woman, as you'll see, is going to affect the whole world. And they say that this is going to be the headquarters of the Antichrist in Babylon. I don't follow that view. But let's continue. Verse 6. I saw the woman, the harlot, drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. But the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and yet is. Then in verse 9, look at verse 9. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are what? You see 7 mountains. That is why I don't hold the view that they're going to kill Antichrist, he's going to be resurrected. Although I could be wrong. Because it's defined as a mountain. So when one of the heads is slain, it could be one of his territory, part of his territory. Whether that's going to be that way or not, I don't know for a fact. I don't know that. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Aside from Rio de Janeiro, which sits on 7 hills or 7 mountains, there are other locations, but there's no other place on earth that fits a specific entity, if I can put it that way, or place that fits a description. What city is that? Because it's defined as a city. What woman is that? They believe it is Rome. Rome has been known since all of history, or most of history, as the city of 7 hills. There are other territories that have had, not too many, there are a few others that are set in place and constructed in 7 hills. But the description given in the scriptures, there's only one that fits the description. And that's Rome. Just keep that in mind. There are also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, another has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not, is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, whom have received no kingdom as of yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Verse 15, then he said to me, the waters, remember verse 1, I saw the harlot who sits on many waters. Remember that. The waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Now, we're almost done. Look at verse 18. He tells him who the woman is. And here's where it gets controversial. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. What city was it that reigned on the king of the earth during John's time? Who knows? If the writer was referring to that time, because it uses the present tense, it's the city that reigns over all the earth. What city was that? It was Rome. If he means still to come in the future, meaning if it's referring to the city that's going to reign at that time, then it can change. We don't know. I don't know for a fact. Because this can play out differently. But if the writer meant, and he told John, it's the city that reigns over all the kingdoms, John would have understood that it was referring to Rome. Let me read you this. The Catholic Encyclopedia states this. It is within the city of Rome, called the City of Seven Hills, that the entire area of Vatican State proper is now confined. That's the Catholic Encyclopedia. Rome has always been known as the City of Seven Hills. Now, whether this is this, I personally still believe that's my number one pick. Do I know that for a fact? I can't say that for sure. But they're my first pick. That is the way they are known. There's a Catholic apologist, his name is Karl Keating. He's a defender of the Catholic Church and the Catholic theology. This is what he says. Karl Keating admits that Rome has long been known as Babylon. Did you get that? Karl Keating is the authority on the Catholic Church, apologist. And if you don't know what an apologist is someone who defends their theology. He's knowledgeable, he knows the doctrine, he's a defender of the Catholic Church. He says this, Karl Keating admits that Rome long has been known as Babylon. Babylon was a code name for Rome. It's always been like that. Let me show you something. Go to 1 Peter real quick. We're almost done. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5, it's actually the last chapter. We'll read the last few verses. Verse 12. We know when you guys are there. Say amen. I want you guys to see this. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 12. Peter says this. By Silvanus, our faithful brother, I consider him. I have written to you briefly, exhorting and testifying that this is the true grace of God in which you stand. She who is in Babylon, you hear that? She who is in Babylon, elect together with you, greets you, and so does Mark, my son. Now, why do I read that? Because Babylon did not exist during this time. Karl Keating admits that Rome has always been known as Babylon. Keating claims, and he's not the only one, Keating claims that Peter's statement, the church here in Babylon, referring to this, the church here in Babylon sends you her greeting, is a mention of Rome. He admits that. Babylon did not exist. This is a reference to Rome. Most scholars understand this. So the woman back in Revelation that reigns over the kings of the earth is believed to be the Roman Catholic Church. And if you know history, we're going to close. If you know history, and I've read a couple of books on church history, if you know history, then you know that there's no other entity that's been more hostile, discriminatory, persecuted, killed and murdered more Christians than the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, it was under the Spanish rule that they were the most cruel. The Inquisition was started by the Jesuits, and their main purpose was to go after the evangelical Christians because they did not believe and agree with the Catholic Church. Now, whether the woman is a Catholic Church or not, I can't say 100% for a fact. I just personally believe it's probably true because that's my first pick. History shows that and demonstrates that. I would recommend any of you who want to know more information to read the book A Woman Rides the Beast. It's written by Dave Hunt. A Woman Rides the Beast is a really, really good book. Another good book is The Two Babylons. It talks about all of this. But the one that I would recommend is The Woman Rides the Beast, written by Dave Hunt. I would recommend that if you want to know more information. Let's close. Father, we thank you, we praise you as always, my Father, for your word and your truth. Lord, I just pray that they all exercise their own mind and their own discretion, make up their own minds. As always, my Father, minister to us. Help us, my Father, to be aware and to see, my Father, always be on guard to understand and see what's coming in the future. We look to you, my Father, for the direction and guidance that we need as always. Help us, my Father, to understand these things and to get it right, my Father. We love you, we praise you, we thank you. In Jesus' name. Let's close.
Amen.
For He is Lord.
For He is Lord.
He is Lord.
He is Lord.
He has risen from the dead, and He is Lord. He is Lord. Everybody. Every knee shall bow, every tongue that Jesus Christ is Lord. All right, we'll get it better. We'll work on it, you guys. Thank you.